They laughed at her from the moment she walked into the gym. They laughed at her small frame, at her plain clothes, at the way her shoes squeaked with every step. They called her the janitor's sister. They called her fragile. They said she would break in half if anyone touched her. They thought she was nothing, just another lost face wandering into the wrong place. The boxing class was alive with noise that day, the heavy bags swinging, gloves pounding leather, trainers barking orders, mirrors reflecting bodies flexing and posing, sweat dripping on the polished floor, the smell of protein shakes mixed with disinfectant, the air buzzing with the sound of arrogance. And in the middle of all that chaos, she appeared, quiet like a shadow, carrying nothing but an old canvas bag and a calm look in her eyes. Her name was Emma, though nobody cared to ask. She was small, barely above 5 feet. Her body looked soft, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. Her clothes were faded, her gloves scuffed and patched, her shoes worn thin and cracked. Everything about her screamed out of place, and yet there was something in the way she moved. Slow but steady, each step careful, each glance sharp, as if she carried a secret. Nobody else could see. At the front desk stood Ryan, the young trainer with muscles carved like stone and an ego to match. He was busy listening to a fitness model complain about the lighting for her latest video. Her voice high, her tone entitled, she barely noticed Emma standing nearby. And when Emma finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the noise like a knife through cloth. She asked simply if she could sign up for sparring. Ryan looked up, his eyes dragging from her shoes to her gloves, his lips curling into half a smirk. "Sparring," he repeated, his voice dripping with doubt. "This is not a yoga class. This is a boxing ring. Are you sure you even know how to throw a punch?" The model beside him laughed, flipping her ponytail and rolling her eyes. "Oh, honey, you will get crushed," she said, her laughter sharp enough to draw attention from others nearby. The trainees began to notice her, big men in branded tank tops, women in bright leggings holding phones and water bottles. They looked at Emma as if she were a joke waiting to happen. One of them muttered loudly that she was lost. Another called out that she should go back to cleaning floors. Another said she looked like she had walked in from a thrift store. The laughter spread, bouncing off the gym walls, cruel and loud. In the corner of the gym, leaning against a heavy bag, stood Marcus, one of the regular fighters, tall, muscular, and always ready to show off. He spotted Emma and grinned wide. His brand-new gloves gleamed under the lights, his hair perfect, his smile full of arrogance. He had built his reputation on bullying beginners, posting clips of himself, humiliating new fighters online. He loved the cheers. He loved the power. And now he saw Emma as his next victim. The crowd encouraged him, chanting his name, telling him to take her down. Some pulled out their phones already, ready to record what they thought would be a funny beating. The room filled with laughter and taunts. Emma stood in the middle of it all, calm, unbothered, her eyes never leaving Marcus. She asked him softly if he was willing to spar with her, her words simple but heavy with challenge. The room roared with more laughter. Phones shook as people struggled to hold them steady while laughing. Some women mocked her shoes, mimicking the squeak. Others whispered about how crazy she was. Marcus stepped forward, raising his gloves, his voice booming across the gym. He called her lightweight. He called her kid. He said one punch from him would send her home crying. The crowd loved it. The noise was deafening. But Emma did not flinch. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply bent down, tied the straps of her old gloves tighter, and nodded once. Ryan scribbled her name on the sheet, his smirk widening. "Fine," he said. 1 round, 3 minutes. "Marcus, do not break her too badly." The others chuckled. Expecting a quick and easy show, Emma climbed into the ring, her steps quiet, her shoes squeaking softly against the canvas. The crowd pushed closer, their voices sharp, their laughter cruel. calling her names, mocking her again, their phones raised, their screens glowing, waiting for the moment they thought would make them laugh for weeks. But Emma kept her eyes steady, her breathing calm, her presence strangely heavy for someone so small. Marcus bounced on his toes, shadowboxing for the crowd, his red gloves flashing, his body moving with showy confidence. He called out to the audience, asking if they were ready to see him crush. A beginner. The cheers exploded, the gym vibrating with arrogance and mockery. He turned to Emma with a smirk, asked her name, called her Tinkerbell, called her weak, and laughed with the others. The gym was united against her. Emma stood silent, in her corner, her gloves hanging low, her head tilted slightly, her eyes sharp. Not on the crowd, not on the trainer, not on the insults, only on Marcus. She had not thrown a punch yet. She had not moved much, but something about her stillness was unsettling. Though nobody admitted it, the room continued to laugh. The bell had not yet rung, but already the tension was building like a storm waiting to break. The bell rang sharp and clear, and in that instant, the noise of the gym seemed to explode as the crowd cheered and shouted and laughed, their voices echoing off the walls, every phone lifted higher to capture what they thought would be an easy show. Marcus came forward with a grin stretching across his face, his gloves moving fast, his body bouncing with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged by a woman half his size. His jab snapped like a whip. His cross followed heavy, his movements full of energy meant to crush and impress. But Emma did not rush or panic. She shifted her weight, her feet sliding lightly on the canvas, her body weaving left and right as if she was slipping through the air itself. The crowd howled with laughter at first, thinking she was running away, thinking she was scared. Some shouted, "Quit before you get hurt." Others yelled that she was dancing like she belonged in a ballet class. One man near the ropes shouted, "Go back to cardio training." The gym felt like a storm of mockery aimed at her small frame, yet Emma kept moving smooth and steady. Her eyes locked, not on the noise, but on Marcus. Her gaze sharp, reading every twitch of his shoulder, every movement of his hips, every flicker that showed where his next punch would come from. Marcus grew louder with each swing, calling her weak, calling her nothing, shouting for the crowd to cheer as he threw combination after combination. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut, hook, cross, his fists slicing through the air, but they landed on nothing but empty space. Emma leaned away, ducked under, tilted her head just enough for his glove to graze past without touch. Her calm was unnatural, her breathing even, her movement smooth, and though the crowd still laughed, a few eyes began to narrow. A few trainers at the edge of the ring leaned forward, their voices low with unease. One trainer whispered to another that this was not the clumsy panic of a beginner. No, this was something else. The way she bent her knees, the way her feet slid across the canvas, the way her body turned at the exact moment a punch came. That was trained movement, precise and controlled. But their whispers were drowned by the noise of the others who kept chanting for Marcus to finish it, to end the round quickly, to put her down with one heavy shot. Emma circled slowly, her gloves still low, her eyes fixed on Marcus, who was beginning to show the first signs of frustration, his grin slipping, his brows pulling together, his punches losing their clean rhythm. He wanted to end it in seconds, but seconds were stretching into long moments where he missed again. And again, the crowd started to notice, their laughter thinning, their jeers cracking into uneasy murmurs. Some still shouted, but their voices carried less conviction. A few of the phones trembled as their owners realized they were not capturing a comedy, but perhaps something else entirely. Marcus snarled and pushed harder, stepping in closer, throwing a heavy right hook that whistled through the air. Emma ducked under it with ease, sliding out to the side, her shoes squeaking softly against the canvas, the sound almost mocking him. The crowd gasped lightly, though quickly covering it with laughter again, pretending it was still funny, still safe to mock. But their eyes were shifting, their certainty no longer solid. Emma remained silent, her face calm, her movements slow but deliberate. her eyes never leaving Marcus, who was now red with effort, sweat beginning to drip from his forehead, his breathing louder, his arrogance cracking under the weight of a fight he thought would be nothing. His fists moved faster, wilder, less clean. The crowd screamed for him to put her down, but in their hearts, some were beginning to wonder. Why had she not fallen? Why had she not even flinched? Near the ropes, a group of regular fighters watched closely. One of them muttered that her stance looked familiar, the way she angled her body, the way she slipped punches. It reminded him of something he had seen in professional rings, not in beginners. His friend scoffed, but his eyes stayed locked on Emma, doubt creeping into his voice as he muttered, "Maybe she is not who we think she is. Maybe she is more." Marcus threw another flashy uppercut, his muscles flexing, his voice shouting out as if he was already celebrating the hit. But Emma stepped sideways, her body turning like water, her eyes reading the motion before it even finished. She glided out of reach, her calm never shaken, and for a moment the crowd fell quieter, their laughter dying mid-shout, their phones still raised but their voices uncertain. They had expected a beating, but all they saw was a storm of punches hitting nothing but air. Emma had not thrown a single punch yet, and that alone unsettled them. She was not desperate, she was not defensive in panic. She was waiting with patience that felt like control. The crowd did not understand it, but they felt it in their bones. The shift in the air, the tension building like the tight string of a bow pulled back and waiting to release. Marcus growled with frustration, his ego burning, his pride wounded by the fact that his punches were being treated like toys. He stepped harder, driving her toward the ropes, his voice loud, his gloves flashing red, his body hungry for a strike. He smirked again, thinking he had her cornered, thinking he would crush her with one brutal shot. Emma's eyes flicked once to his chest, then to his elbow, then back to his ribs, her body lowering, her stance shifting, her core tightening as if preparing something hidden, something powerful. The crowd leaned forward, their voices caught between laughter and silence, their phones recording the moment without knowing what was about to happen. The tension was thick, like the whole gym was holding its breath, and as Marcus swung wide again, exposing his side, Emma moved like lightning, her body coiled, her eyes sharp, her motion precise. And in that instant, the crowd felt something was about to break. The crowd leaned in as Marcus swung his wide punch, his red glove cutting through the air like a hammer aimed at crushing stone. The sound of his effort echoing, his breath heavy, his body twisting with all his weight. But Emma moved in that moment, her body dropping low, her feet sliding, her hips turning like a spring uncoiling, and her right glove snapped forward, sharp and fast, her fist striking his side with precision, the contact loud and sickening, a dull thud that cut through the noise of the gym. The laughter died instantly. The cheer froze in the throats of the crowd. Silence swept the room like a wave. Marcus's smirk vanished, his body folding as if a wire had been cut, his face twisted in shock and pain, his knees buckled, and he dropped to the canvas, his arms wrapping around his ribs, his breath stolen, his voice gone, his mouth opening but no words coming out, only a weak cough, his pride broken with one clean strike. Emma stood still, her glove still raised, her breathing steady, her eyes calm. She did not celebrate. She did not even smile. She simply stepped back, her focus unwavering, while the crowd stared in disbelief. Phones still raised but shaking now. No one making a sound, only the faint hum of the lights above filling the quiet. Trainers at the side of the ring rushed forward, one kneeling to check Marcus, his voice low with worry, another waving for space, their faces pale as they realized what had just happened. Whispers broke the silence, faint at first, one voice asking, "Did you see that?" Another muttering that the punch was too clean, too perfect. A third voice shaky, saying that was a liver shot. and only someone trained could land it like that. The murmurs spread like fire through dry grass. The laughter gone, replaced by disbelief, replaced by fear, replaced by the heavy weight of realization that this was no beginner. This was something else. Someone else entirely. Emma's calm presence unsettled them more. She stood there like stone, her gloves worn, her shoes cracked, yet her power undeniable, her control absolute. The silence of her face louder than any words. She had absorbed their insults, their jeers, their arrogance, and in one motion, she had torn it apart. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, guilt creeping into their eyes, shame curling in their stomachs, the echo of their laughter now burning against their ears. Marcus tried to rise, his body trembling, his face pale, his breath shallow. He collapsed again, curling tighter, coughing, clutching his side, his arrogance shattered, his ego lying broken on the canvas beside him. The trainer whispered for him to stay down, his voice firm, his hands checking pulse and breath, calling for water, calling for calm. The crowd gasped again, some turning away, some lowering their phones, suddenly aware that this was no game. This was real. The head coach, a man named Carter, stepped forward, his face weathered from years of fights, his eyes sharp but confused. He stared at Emma, his mouth slightly open, his voice low. "Who is she?" he muttered, his tone carrying more weight than the crowd's shouts, his question hanging heavy in the silence. And then another voice came from the doorway, strong and rough, a laugh cutting through the tension like gravel rolling across concrete. It was Coach Raymond, an old legend in the city boxing scene, his gray hair messy, his presence commanding. He walked in with calm confidence, his eyes falling on Emma, then on Marcus, writhing on the floor. His laugh grew louder, deep and rough. "I knew it," he said, pointing toward Emma. "I knew that was her." The crowd turned, their eyes wide, their faces tight with shock as he spoke again. "That is Emma Price, former regional champion, undefeated for 3 years, retired only because of her knee injury, and you fools just mocked her." Gasps spread. Whispers turned into stammers. People froze as their insults replayed in their minds, their words now cutting themselves. The fitness models who had laughed earlier lowered their phones, their cheeks red. The men who had shouted cruel names stared at the floor, their bravado gone. Carter shook his head slowly, realization dawning, his voice soft with disbelief. "A champion," he whispered. "We laughed at a champion." Emma said nothing, her silence heavy, her eyes calm, her gloves slowly lowering. She unstrapped them one by one, the Velcro ripping loud in the quiet, each sound a reminder of what she had just done. She placed the gloves on the corner stool, her hands bare now, her knuckles red but steady. She stepped back, her body calm, her scar catching the light, her presence commanding respect without asking for it. Marcus groaned on the canvas, his pride gone, his followers silent, his friends unable to meet his eyes. The crowd shifted, their energy reversed, no longer mocking, no longer confident, now small, now guilty, their arrogance shattered like glass beneath a hammer. The truth laid bare before them. They had laughed at her shoes, her clothes, her size, and in return, she had given them a lesson they would never forget. Coach Raymond crossed his arms, his eyes sweeping the room, his voice booming. "You all thought you were clever, mocking a fighter because of her look, her clothes, her age. But what you saw here is the truth. Skill is not in fashion, strength is not in appearance, respect is not optional." His words hit them harder than any punch, the silence heavy, the shame thick, the gym now a mirror reflecting. Their arrogance back at them, Emma picked up her old canvas bag, slinging it over her shoulder, her movements slow, calm, deliberate. She glanced once at Marcus, still curled and gasping, then turned toward the ropes, her steps soft, her shoes squeaking faintly, a sound that now carried weight, a sound that now silenced even the loudest mouths in the room. She stepped down from the ring, her back straight, her presence unbroken. And as she walked toward the door, the crowd could only watch, their phones forgotten, their arrogance crushed, their voices caught in their throats. The woman they had mocked had floored their strongest fighter with one clean shot, and they would never laugh the same way again. The gym was frozen in silence, the sound of gloves hitting bags, of trainers barking, of music echoing from the speaker. All of it had stopped as if the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Marcus lay on the canvas, curled into himself, his arms clutched around his ribs, his face pale, his breath short, every cough making the silence heavier. The man who once laughed the loudest now looked broken and small, his arrogance gone in a single strike. Emma stood still at the edge of the ring, her gloves hanging loose from her hands, her eyes calm, her body relaxed. She looked nothing like the fighter who had just delivered the cleanest shot anyone in that gym had ever seen. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She did not even speak. She only waited, her presence quiet but stronger than every shout that had filled the room minutes before. The crowd began to stir, whispers crawling through the silence, people repeating her name under their breath after hearing Coach Raymond, Emma Price. A name that carried weight, a name that some remembered from old matches, from posters long taken down, from stories of a lightweight champion who had once dominated rings in the region. Those who had laughed at her shoes now hid their faces. Those who had mocked her frame now kept their heads low, the shame wrapping around them like heavy chains. Carter, the head coach, rubbed his hands together, his eyes locked on Emma, as if trying to piece together how he had let this happen. His voice cracked with guilt as he muttered that he should have stopped the match. He should have known better. He should never have allowed the crowd to treat her like that. The trainees around him nodded slowly, their earlier confidence broken, their bravado stripped away. They realized now that their cruelty had been nothing but ignorance. Marcus groaned on the floor. The trainer by his side whispered for him to stay down, his voice serious, his hand pressing against Marcus's shoulder. Another trainer shook his head and muttered that Marcus was lucky she had not aimed higher. That shot could have stopped. His heart. The words spread quickly, hitting the crowd harder than Emma's glove. Their eyes widened, their faces drained. They finally understood the danger hidden inside the woman they had ridiculed. Coach Raymond stepped closer to the ring, his laugh gone now, replaced by a deep seriousness. He called out that the lesson was clear. Never judge by size, never judge by clothes. Respect must always come first. His voice echoed off the walls, each word carving guilt into the faces of the crowd. The fitness models lowered their phones. The men in branded tank tops avoided his eyes. Even Ryan at the desk, who had smirked at Emma's request, now stared down at his paper, his pen trembling in his hand. Emma unstrapped her gloves slowly, the ripping sound loud in the silence, each tier of Velcro sharp like thunder. She set the gloves down on the stool, her small hands bare now, her knuckles red but steady. She picked up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, her steps soft, her shoes squeaking faintly on the canvas. That squeak that had once been mocked now felt like the drumbeat of truth, reminding everyone of what they had just witnessed. The gym parted as she stepped down, the crowd moving aside without a word, their faces lowered, their eyes unable to meet hers. They were no longer mocking, no longer laughing. They were humbled, stripped of pride. She walked past them without speaking, her silence louder than any insult they had thrown at her, her scar catching the light, her calm expression, cutting deeper than anger ever could. Marcus finally sat up, his face pale, sweat dripping down his forehead, his breath ragged. He looked around for support, but no one moved to help him. No one clapped, no one cheered. The same crowd that had once boosted his ego now turned away, ashamed of ever following him. The power he held in that gym was gone, shattered by the woman. He had mocked before throwing a single punch. Coach Raymond crossed his arms, his gaze still on Emma. His voice carried once more. She does not need applause. She does not need cheers. She came here for herself, and you all laughed at her. You all showed what arrogance looks like, and she showed you what real power feels like. His words hit hard, leaving no space for excuses, no place to hide from the truth. The gym felt smaller now. The mirrors that had reflected their pride now reflected their shame. Every person in that room carried the weight of their laughter, the memory of their cruel words, the lesson carved deep. Emma did not look back as she reached the door. Her bag resting against her hip, her eyes steady on the street outside, she pushed the door open, the hinges creaking, the light from outside spilling in, and with one final step, she was gone, leaving behind silence that no one dared to break. The crowd slowly began to move again, but not with the same arrogance, not with the same laughter. Their movements were heavy, their voices low. Some whispered that they had just witnessed a legend. Others whispered that they would never forget the way Marcus fell. Still others shook their heads, repeating that they would never underestimate anyone again. The energy of the gym had shifted, the arrogance replaced with respect, the noise replaced with caution. Marcus leaned against the ropes now, his hands trembling, his face still pale. His friends who once cheered him stayed quiet. Their loyalty dissolved, their voices gone. The fighter who had thrived on mocking others was now silent, broken, his place in the gym erased by the single shot of a woman they had all underestimated. His fall becoming the story that would follow him for the rest of his days. And as the gym carried the heavy weight of what had happened, the name Emma Price hung in the air like smoke, unshakable, unforgettable. A name that reminded them of the danger of arrogance and the strength hidden in silence. The crowd would carry that name with them, every punch they threw, every word they spoke, haunted by the memory of the moment when laughter turned to shame.